Spent a lot of money and raised a lot of heck and had an awful good time.
You go down Pleasant Street, there'd be 1, 2, 3, 4 beer joints there. When they come down for the wood, of course, those guys would go for a few beers, and sometimes they get out of hand, you know.
They're gone. Those men that did that, they went when we stopped bringing logs down the river. So they're like the cowboy. He doesn't exist anymore, the cowboy. You know, if you want to see a cowboy, well, they'll act as a cowboy. If you want to see a river driver, they'd have to act as one. So those days are gone. But it was all because of the river that these things were made.
The influx of workers from around the globe helped to establish a mosaic of ethnically defined neighborhoods in the ever-growing city of Berlin. These neighborhoods not only reflected, but shaped this city well into the 20th century as the power and prestige of the Brown Company grew.
You had not only the Franco-Americans, but you also had the Irish, you had the Germans, you had the Russians and the Germans and the Poles, and you had, of course, the Jewish people on both the Russian and German sides. You had the Scandinavians. They were definitely separating the neighborhoods, but a lot of the neighborhoods overlapped.
There were probably 10 distinct neighborhoods. Down on Western Avenue, you approached Cascade and Cascade Hill and Cascade Flats, where all the Italians lived, and they ended up living around there because when the Brown Company built the Cascade newsprint mill in 1902, they built the largest newsprint mill in the world, and they wanted to build it out of brick. So they hired stonemasons, and the stonemasons that they hired were people who landed on Ellis Island. They were all Italian. Then that spilled over into the south end of Berlin on Western Avenue. So you had people that spoke Italian down there, and as you came up Western Avenue, you approached what they call Russian Hill, and where the Russian church is today, and those people were all Russian. Of course, they spoke Russian.
Well, my father and mother came from the Ukraine. I remember growing up as a kid that there were 400 Russian people here. That was the most that has ever been here. That's children and parents and so on. And while we were growing up, we had 5 Russian boarders that lived with us. They paid $15 a week for board and room. My mother fed them every day, did their laundry every week.
You had the French primarily on the east side because there was a very strong French church over there.
I grew up in like a French neighborhood right across the street from Angel Guardian Elementary School. I attended St. Pat's Elementary School because I didn't know French. And Angel Guardian Elementary School, it was basically, I want to say, 90% French the whole day. So that's why I would travel a mile away to go to St. Pat's, but of course everyone in my neighborhood went to that school, Angel Guardian.
You had Irish Acre, which is the neighborhood we're sitting in now. And then you had Norwegian Village, which was up north.
The east side did have a small population of Germans. Goebel Street would be the hub of that.
The Germans were very good machinists and very good people to work on, build, design machines. Well, when we had 2 paper mills here, they needed people who could build equipment for the paper industry. So a lot of Germans landed here.
Everybody just brought their own histories with them. But after the years and through the years, a lot of them would start mingling, although there were still definite boundaries. They had their own cultures, of course, their languages.
When I was a little kid growing up in the Norwegian Village, Norwegian was spoken in every household. The rule was you speak Norwegian in the house, but if you go out with English-speaking people, you speak English. It was very common to hear elderly or older Norwegian men and women with very heavy Norwegian accents trying to speak English, which was quite funny.
We talked French all the time at home because my parents were French Canadian, and so we were first generation American. Very few people we knew that didn't talk French. Some, but very few. It was mostly French neighborhoods we lived in.
If you'd go to somebody's house, if the grandparents were there, they would be speaking in a native language, or they would be seeing some foods that you never saw before. When you go over to some of the French places, I'd never eaten meat pie.
Well, at Christmas time, you know, there was always a turkey, but there were always the French meat pies, the tourtières, as they called them. That was always, we're waiting for Mom's batch of tourtières, and everybody had to taste and sample that, along with all the other goodies. They were, in the spring of the season, they were what they call crepes. That had French tradition to it, Canadian tradition, and you know, there was just something going all the time that we enjoyed having at a certain time of year. The new batch of maple syrup that came with it. People were producing syrup and comparing from Canada to home here, homegrown stuff, and that was interesting as well. You know, maple taffy runs, and it was all real good. I mean, it's very traditional, and a lot of it stayed in place.
I had some friends that were of Italian background, and their parents actually came from Italy. They had a fruit stand downtown, and they got all of their fruits from Italy. Matter of fact, the family owned an olive orchard in Italy from their other families, and they would import a lot of things.
I had never eaten a black olive till I went to his parents were Italian, and they had olive oil and olives, and I had never eaten a black olive. I was probably 12 or 13 at the time. I didn't even know what a black olive was. I thought it was spoiled, so I got to explain that. And there were some, when I played over to the Ollie's house, the grandmother who cooked, there were some desserts that were great. I don't know what the name was, but they were Scandinavian desserts, pastries that were excellent.
I grew up in the Norwegian village on Denmark Street. I had a best friend. We started playing together when we were 2 and 3, and we're still friends. And her mother made the most wonderful meat cakes, and so she always had me there for meat cakes. And my mother would make the American cooking, and they'd swap at Christmas time. Her mother made sunbuckles and futtermans and all those good Norwegian things.
My grandfather, Adrian O'Neill, was a janitor for St. Karen's, and he also took on the responsibility of seeing that the nuns and the priests had lots of food from his garden. And one of the things my grandfather used to do, that he would take all the squash that he grew, and he would take a nail and score names and prayers and everything into the squash. And as the squash would grow, the nail marks would expand, and they would scar over. And there was always a "Bless Your Little Irish Heart" on the squash, and someone's name, and of course everyone loved that, because maybe there'd be a short little Irish prayer or a quote or something that he would have scratched into the squash. So when you got this 20-pound squash, you also got a little bit of him along with that.
I remember my uncle telling me a story about a Jewish family that lived off the corner, probably about 3 houses down from where my father lived. And they were going to be killing some chickens one morning. This is probably back in 1917, 1918. So the kid came over to my father's house and said, "The rabbi's coming over to kosher kill all the chickens." So all the kids would gather, whether they were Catholic or Protestant or Jewish, and they'd all go watch the rabbi say his prayers and, you know, just do his prayers over these chickens that were about to be slaughtered.
As I was getting older, my mother said, "Well, the day is coming when you're going to be confirmed in a Jewish religion at the age of 13. You become a bar mitzvah, you know. And my mother had a big party. She made the cooking and everything. And I'd say my mother was one of the best Jewish cooks in Berlin.
It's a fascinating part of our past, where all the diversity would just, all the people would just come together and just sharing each other's practices and each other's religions or cultures, whatever the case was.
As the older generation was dying off, you know, and the newer generation come in, they begin to more familiar with the different religions, you know. They knew I was Jewish, it didn't bother them, and I knew they were Catholic, and I didn't, you know, I honored them. So we knew each other, you know. And that's the way it went. You know, with the Catholic religion and some of the it's quite a difference in believing, you know.
Most of the time we all got along quite well, and I didn't appreciate the different cultures so much until I got a little older and got to think more about why these people were the way they were and where they came from, and got to appreciate it a little bit more.
At the dawn of the 20th century, the city of Berlin, New Hampshire had a population of 9,000 people. With the success of the Brown Company, the population of the city steadily grew for the next 30 years, reaching 20,000 by 1930. From 1902 until 1938, trolleys ran between Berlin and Gorham, connecting these two mill cities by rail.
I used to love to ride the trolley. I used to take it with my mother, and I used to take it with my father.
It was a nice ride. It was different, you know, than horse and buggy.
A lot of clanging, you know. Yeah. You would just hear those wheels, you know. Yeah.
We took it at around the 8th Street Bridge. There was an A&P store right there, and you took it in front of that A&P store. It didn't cost very much because we didn't have very much. I can't remember. It was just peanuts, really, compared to now, maybe 25 cents or something like that. Ride from Berlin to Gorham, that was the biggest deal of all on the trolley. Go into the drugstore down there and have ice cream. They had chairs, they had books that you could buy and a lot of things, and it smelled so good. Of course, they'd have to switch the seats, you know. They switch the seats this way when you're going down and switch them coming back, and it was just, well, a big experience, really. It was like you were going on a real safari. And the fact that I was going to eat when I got there, that was special, because I love to eat, still do. Then came the buses, and that was fun too. That was a different thing. But the trolley was special.
For the children of Berlin, there were always plenty of activities, but for a lot of the kids, the place to be was the community club. Formerly the YMCA, the community club was the popular hangout and central meeting place for teens and young ones alike.
The community club was a great thing because the Browns started, it was a YMCA to start with, and the Browns gave a lot of money towards it because the girls, that was before my time, of course, had their own girls club for a while. But then at a certain date, and I think it was in the 30s, they opened it up to women and they changed the name to Community Club.
I remember it was a $5 pass for the year, and you could swim all you wanted. And the chlorine at the time for the pool was provided by the Brown Company. And from what I remember, they paid all the heating and the electricity. So that was a really big thing for us.
We go to hang around the community club, sit around, talk, decide to play a little ping pong, pool, bowling alley. There was a bowling alley inside the community club.
That was almost like a meeting place between seasons, between hockey and baseball or whatever. You go there and you could candlepin bowl. They had ping pong tables, pinball tables, the track upstairs above the basketball court. It was just where everyone went and played and hung out and, you know.
Go work. You want to work out? Go work out. One of the guys was a boxer. And when we'd go in the gym, when he was working out, we'd go in and spar with him.
The Catholics were encouraged not to go. It was not a good place. So we never went to the community club. I remember the nuns talking about it, not to go to the community club. So we missed out on that. Then after I went to work at Converse and these girls, I went to public school. It told me the fun they had at community club because it was very well chaperoned. If anybody swore, they were out of the club. They couldn't come back. Very few Catholic girls that I talked to, and then now I ask them, did you go to a community club? And then very few will say yes if they went to Catholic school. They say, oh yeah, we knew it was frowned upon, but we went anyway.
That was the greatest place to go and dance. And that was a great place to meet. All the boys would go there, all the girls would go there, and we each go home alone. We were very independent. There was no special that you just had one that you could be with. And I liked that. I liked everybody being equal.
With the population growing and the ethnic melting pot becoming more and more diverse, Berlin also became a center for recreation. The Nansen Ski Club, the oldest active ski club in the nation, was organized in 1872. In the early 20th century and well into the 1980s, the Nansen Ski Club held skiing events, hosted the United States Olympic ski jumping tryouts, and invited some of the best ski jumpers in the world to Berlin for competitions.
Originally it was called the Skiklubben Norsk-Amerikansk, and it was for Norwegian-speaking people only. And the reason why they did that was to keep the Swedes out. So if you were Swedish and spoke Norwegian, that was okay, but the club was conducted, all the meetings and everything was conducted in Norwegian, so that was the rule.
We had a great number of Scandinavians that came to the area, and a lot of the attraction was, of course, the work. And Berlin, because of its proximity near the Canadian border, is a lot like, you know, the conditions would have been in Norway and Sweden. So we had a lot of Scandinavians that came into the area. And of course, they brought a lot of their traditions with them. And one of them was skiing.
When Fridtjof Nansen, the famous Arctic explorer, came to Berlin, the club members decided in honor of Dr. Fridtjof Nansen to change the name to Nansen Ski Club. And everyone still, you know, my grandmother's generation and my dad's generation always talked about the day that Fridtjof Nansen came to Berlin. It was just a huge honor to have him here. Back in those days, it would be like Neil Armstrong coming to your town because he was a very famous person in his own right.
The club would eventually ease its restrictions on non-Norwegian members, and by the 1920s, it was known nationwide as one of the finest ski clubs in North America. In 1936, the ski club built the Big Nansen, a 171-foot tall ski jump that at the time was the tallest in North America.
Alf Halvorsen, who was the youngest president of Nansen Ski Club, he raised the funds to build the big jump up on the border of Berlin and Milan.
Anybody who was adept at coming down on a pair of skis off that jump and had the courage to jump off the end and could prove themselves, could jump off that jump.
It's a good fast ride. It's faster than a roller coaster. 'Cause you get your own control. You got to control your speed yourself, you know. Then you got to know what you're doing, because if you don't know what to do, you might as well not go there. You're going to get hurt.
That Nansen ski jump, I jumped off of there one time, and that was the last time. One day, another skier asked me if we'd go try the big jump. So we went up, and I tried it, and I gave it up.
You had to be careful here in Berlin, because if you come down and you had a crosswind, you were taking a ride in the stairways there. But me, I always watched what the direction of the wind when I look at the flag of the takeoff. If they'd wave me to go and I see the wind go across, I wouldn't go. I'd wait a little bit longer, you know, because you don't want to go down on a crosswind.
There was a lot of history there too, and as far as the Nansen Ski Club, with the jumpers that came in, there were jumpers from all over the country, all over the world actually. Good ski jumpers that came here.
That jump has been was used for years and years and years for Olympic tryouts and World Cup skiing, and it was quite the sight. I recall my bestie, my grandmother, telling me that back in the heyday of the ski jumping, the city of Berlin had 20,000 inhabitants, and 40,000 people would go to the ski jumping competition. So the city really exploded.
I remember they were saying, probably back in the 40s or 50s, saying that one weekend that they'd had the competition, there wasn't a drop of gas to be had anywhere in Berlin, because we just had so many people coming into town to see this.
If you knew the right people, you could get a pass and you could park close. If you didn't know, you had to walk a couple miles before you could get to it.
By the 1950s, the Nansen Ski Club had woven itself into the fabric of Berlin, and their annual Winter Carnival had become a major event that drew spectators and participants from miles around.
The Winter Carnivals used to be comprised of selecting a queen, having a parade up the street, inviting dignitaries into the area. A strong component of those Winter